The podcast that you're about to hear is one that Sue and I put together on the subject of homeschooling. Now, we know that this is not a topic that everyone is going to be interested in, and it isn't necessarily a biblical topic, but it is one that many parents are concerned about, and it is one that is frankly rather relevant for our day. There is kind of a crisis of educational options today, and we wanted to simply explain how the Lord led us in the area of schooling our children and how we took all four of them from kindergarten to high school graduation and did it successfully. And so, for those of you that have questions about homeschooling, we really hope that this podcast is going to be helpful. We're here to talk about homeschooling today. And really, for the purpose of just giving parents information that they may need if this is a decision they decide to make. So here we are, a couple who've been in ministry for a long time, and we homeschooled all of our kids, all four of them. So what was the main impetus behind starting to homeschool, as you recall?
Yeah, the way I recall it, and this is going to be a little bit of story time here, but the way I recall it is that I felt like we sort of got trapped into homeschooling a little bit by the Lord. We moved to Ontario to start a church when our oldest was in the middle of first grade. And we had some friends, some peers where we lived before that homeschooled,
Right.
and that had been introduced to us. We never did put that child into school because we knew
We
there
were
was a
going to
fresh
move.
season
Yeah.
coming, and I think that was a really good call on our part. But when we first got here, the way I remember is that I was pretty excited about the school down the street.
Yeah. Well, we looked into it, as I
Because,
recall.
well, I was just eager to kind of live a little bit more of a selfish life. I wanted to go golfing with you on Mondays and things like that. So we went down. I made an appointment with the principal at that elementary school, and we went down there to check it out. And as the Lord would have it, the entire school fell apart during that 1 hour interview that I was there.
I don't recall this.
Well, you didn't come with me.
Okay.
I went by myself. And it wasn't, I don't want to, vilify that school or the teachers or anything. It was just one of those days. First of all, I walked in the door and I realized that there were 4 classrooms in an open space. It was an open concept elementary school.
Oh.
So there were dozens of children trying to learn in one open space. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work. And then just things sort of fell apart. There was some student problems as I was there. And I went home thinking, okay, we need to rethink. We
Wow.
need to pump the brakes here a
Now,
little
before
bit.
we go on, we probably want to let people know that we were both public schooled,
Yes.
you and me.
Mhm.
And not only that, but my family, my dad served as, he started off when I was a little boy as a teacher, a public school teacher. Then he became a principal. And then when you and I met, he was a superintendent of the schools. And I also had 2 other of my siblings who went into the public school career
Sure.
and taught for many, many years. And so this was the way we kind of grew up and
It's
knew
all we
education.
knew,
Yeah, it's
right.
all we knew. So this whole idea of schooling your child at home was really very new to you and me.
It was new, but it was very intriguing. I mean, our peers in Washington, it seemed pretty natural as I was thinking about hearing the things they were talking about
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. However, I wasn't quite ready to give up my life.
Yeah.
What I considered in that moment
Yeah.
was going to be my life for that. So we went home. I went home after that interview at the school, and I thought, I'm just not ready to do this. This isn't the learning environment I had hoped and dreamed for
Yeah.
my kids.
Yeah.
And then very quickly we met some people then where we were pastoring that were homeschooling. I realized, well, if they can figure it out, I can figure it out. And then the advantages for our family, for our kids in particular, began to dawn on me
Yeah.
of what we would be gaining, the little bit that I would be giving up in my freedom,
Yeah.
what we would gain from that. And it's just like the Lord just covered over all those things in my heart and my mind. And that's just what I wanted to do.
So, how would you respond to a mom who is considering the possibility of homeschooling, but maybe struggling with some of the same feelings you were, and thinking, I don't know if I want to give up my me time
Sure.
to have the kids all day, every day with me in the home? How would you respond to that woman?
Yeah. Well, now at this season, speaking from an older woman to a younger woman, I would say, if you feel like this is something the Lord is pointing you to, just get started and you'll find out how He's going to bless it. Just get started. Because there are a lot of things that, there are a lot of implications. Number one, the me time.
Yeah.
You are a busier woman when your children are underfoot all the time. I hear a lot of young women say, I don't think I could be with my kids that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Here's what happens when you're with your kids that much. You turn into the kind of family that learns how to live together, and
Yeah.
you like being with your kids that much.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
true.
don't know that
And
until you get started.
that's something you can't know until
Right.
you actually do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you begin to, I've often said, we gave birth to friends.
Yeah.
They're children first, and
Yeah.
they have to be treated like children. But then in those middle school and high school years, they really become friends, even though you
Yes.
can't treat it exactly like a friendship.
Right.
But then they leave home and they're adults, and now you're true friends.
Now let's tell a little bit of our story, shall we? First of all, when we started homeschooling our kids, they were very young. I mean, as you said already, our
Right.
oldest was in first grade, so she was 6 years old.
Right.
And then our second he was 4, so he wasn't
Basically
ready.
preschool
Yeah, he
age.
wasn't ready to get started.
But they were our only children, and
Yeah.
so whatever we did, we were going to do together.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But I guess what I'm getting at is that we were able to kind of slide into homeschooling in a little bit easier sort of a model than some families who maybe have kids that are in the upper elementary
Right.
years or even junior high, and they're realizing public school just isn't working. And that's challenging. But
Yeah,
you know,
and that has its own challenges. I'm not an experienced voice in that, so I can't really speak to it. But there are some things that I've observed
Yeah.
in other people, and one of the things that I think parents naturally try to do is bring the school environment home
Yeah.
with the kids. They
Yeah.
bring the kids home, and they bring the school environment.
we're going to
home with
start
them.
at 8 o'clock and we're going to go until
Yes,
3:15. And
kind
that
of a
really
regi-
doesn't work for homeschooling, does it?
No, there was a lot of things that I did when we started because our kids, they wanted to play school too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we had desks and we stood up and we said the Pledge of Allegiance, but that was a little bit more because it made it fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, hey, whatever makes it fun, go for it.
Yeah.
There's no right and wrong. But what we're talking about is the feeling like you have to bring home the rigidity of the
Yes.
classroom experience.
The schedule
Mhm.
or whatever. You know, I was as a child, I was a kid who didn't handle school very well from the standpoint that I don't think a group learning experience was really the best way for me to learn. What we tend to do in our public school system is we take 35 kids or whatever at a time, and we shuffle them through this learning process as a group.
Mhm.
And what we learn when we homeschool our kids is that children learn at different levels.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that homeschoolers really find a blessing, that if my child isn't ready to start reading at age 6 or 7 or 8, it's really not a major issue, because once they start reading, they're going to catch up pretty quickly. Isn't
Yeah.
that what you found?
Absolutely. And we had kids, we raised 4 kids. We homeschooled 4 kids. I call them north, south, east, west, because each one of them brought their own learning style.
Yes.
And I felt like, seriously, I have to get used to a new learning style with you. But, some of them learned how to read fairly proficiently in kindergarten. And one of mine just was not interested in the subject until after second grade.
Wow.
That was a little bit hard to deal
So
with at the
going into
time.
third grade, she
Yeah,
started to kind of pick
the
up.
summer after we put the books at school books away
Yeah.
after second grade, and that's when she decided herself to go to the bookcase and pretty much teach herself how to read.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that was not my first.
Yeah.
And so
Otherwise,
by
you might
that
have been
time,
concerned,
I
right?
might have been real concerned,
Sure.
but by that time I knew that and now the funny thing is that child is the most voracious
Yes.
reader.
She's our reader.
She reads all these like Russian brothers, whoever, and like these thick novels that I would never be able to get through. So it proves a point.
I remember that you read a book back in those days that addressed this very issue, and it was something like Better Late Than Early.
Yeah, it was.
Can you tell just a little bit about maybe the
I
theme
think
of
the
that book?
premise of the book is, there's a lot of books that I read, so I may get them a little bit doubled up. But that particular one, I think, was trying to draw attention to the fact that it's artificial for children's eyes and their brain to spend like too much time in those younger years, like just let it develop.
Yeah.
But then there were other books that I read that said, play outside, get experience in real life, biology
Situations, yeah.
situations,
Yeah.
and the reading will come, the reading will follow.
And it does, doesn't it? You know, that, boy, I tell you, I think parents who begin to homeschool and they're starting off, they kind of assume that their kids are going to learn at a particular rate. And when they don't, they get real concerned. Well,
Yeah.
maybe we have a learning problem here.
And I often told young moms, even when I was still a fairly young mom, I said, the worst thing you can do is go and pick up one of those books, what every third grader needs to know.
Oh,
What every first
stay
grader
away
needs
from
to
those.
yeah, just stay away and pray.
Let your child learn at the rate that they are most comfortable learning. That's the thing. And the other beautiful thing about homeschooling that I think we found as parents was that there were times that we could engage our child to learn using their natural interests. In other words, if you've got a child who loves cars and just everything about cars, maybe you got a little boy that just can't get enough about cars. There's so much science and that you can teach from just talking about cars, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
amazing.
And I think you and I have really enjoyed watching that with our grandchildren.
Yes.
So all of our grandchildren have been homeschooled at most of the time,
At
or
some level or
at some
another.
level, and we've really enjoyed not having the day-to-day responsibility, but watching these truths bear out to where you see that the ones that need that movement, that body movement, they're laying on the floor upside down with their feet in the air, reading their science books
Right.
because they must move their body in
Yeah.
order to.
But in public school, we're required to sit at a desk in one
Yeah.
position. And I wonder sometimes in my own schooling how it might have been different if I would have been homeschooled or allowed to read a book in the backyard under a tree
Yeah.
or on my bed laying down or something like that. And that's the freedom that we have with homeschooling, right?
Sure, yeah. We have another grandchild that is just so interested in birds and knows
Yeah.
so
Oh,
much
he's
about
incredible.
birds.
Yeah.
And the freedom to pursue that interest is
As an
just there.
educational pursuit.
Yeah, without being, taunted about it or something like that.
Or even
So,
discouraged. No, we need to get this subject. We can
Yeah.
just let them go and let them learn.
Yeah.
And it is so freeing to let a child learn at their own level, at their own rate of understanding, and to let them learn according to their interests. That is just such a powerful way to teach kids about
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. There are other pockets of other aspects of homeschooling that make it more challenging, and finances is one of them.
Yeah.
By nature, if you're going to homeschool your kids, it means you're going to live on a one and a half income household.
Yeah, and that's
Because someone
challenging.
and that creates a challenge,
Yes.
and it was a challenge for us. And I've just been teaching this Bible study on Proverbs 31 and making the point that there are seasons that come along where sometimes you are able to help your family conserve wealth,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're able to create it.
Yeah.
And as a mother, because primarily it's going to be the mother that does the bulk of the homeschooling,
Right.
that's the generality
Yeah.
anyway. It's very difficult to have a substantial job that
Yes.
brings in a lot of money. However, I saw that the Lord helped me develop the skills to conserve the wealth that was
Yes.
coming in.
Yes.
And, we minimize that in our culture.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that as much and it can be substantial.
Well, it enabled us to do what we did as a family, to raise 4 kids, to homeschool them. And our kids knew nothing of the tightness of our financial budget at the
No,
time.
kids don't.
Yeah.
Kids
I
just
mean,
don't know.
they got 3 square meals a day plus, and they knew no difference from between them and their friends. But there was a lot of belt tightening that went on in our home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I want to deal with another subject. Let's imagine you're talking to a young mom who has a middle schooler. Okay, and she's recognizing the need to bring her child into the home
Mhm.
to perhaps finish the education there, but she says to you, I was never good at math.
Mhm.
And now I've got this child that I need to help deal with math and even work their way into algebra potentially. And I have no idea how I'm going to proceed. What would you tell that mom?
Yeah. So anymore, there are so many resources for just any subject that you want to do. Those didn't exactly exist in the 80s and the 90s
Yeah,
so much, but it
right.
really began to proliferate. And so you can find a resource for just about every subject that your child needs. You
When
can
you talk
find
about resources, give some
uh,
examples.
so there are great curriculums, math curriculums, let's say, that come with a video.
Okay. So
So
you've got a teacher
it's your
on the video.
traditional, right, your traditional textbook, but you've got a video teacher.
Yeah.
And these are, I'm sure some of this is on YouTube. These can be purchased online. I did some of this,
I
in the
remember some science videos that
Mhm.
our kids did.
Yeah. Our last child, I did a health and nutrition one. It changed the course of his life.
Oh, wow.
Just doing this simple health and nutrition coming from a different
That
voice
may
than
be the one
mom.
I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I did. So there are so many resources. There are also in many states, it depends on the state that you live in
Yeah.
because you have to abide by the
Yeah.
the rules of the education board in your state. But there are many states that allow you to just form pods, and another person can actually teach your kids. They don't have to be certified or anything. You can homeschool together.
Right.
There are just so many. It's a matter of wanting it and praying about it
Yeah.
and then doing some research.
Yeah. Another large reason that we decided to homeschool our kids was we recognized, even in the early days, that we wanted to be the ones who were influencing our children
Yes.
in the areas of behavior, manners, things like, whether or not what they're going to learn about evolution
Yeah.
versus creationism, intelligent design. And we wanted to have the freedom to be able to do that in a way that was going to protect their hearts as, young Christians.
Right.
So we can speak to that maybe a little bit about that whole issue of someone who says to you, maybe here's another mom that says, I've been told that if I homeschool my child, they're not going to be properly socialized. What would you say to that mother?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, that's just not an issue whatsoever. But from the time that you and I began homeschooling until now, the socialization that a child will receive in a public school setting is in a completely different orbit
Yes.
than what we were dealing with. We were afraid of our kids, or we wanted to avoid our kids hearing about evolution. Well, now the socialization, now that the messages that are going is just
all the gender issues.
It's out of this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And so I think the important thing I want to say this first. The very most important thing with the decisions about how to educate your kids are to put them with adults in their world that are going to teach a biblical worldview and uphold your values.
Yes.
Now, you can find that in a lot of different areas. You can
Yes.
find that in a Christian school.
Yep.
You can find that in a group setting that maybe you've created yourself or you've bought into.
Yep.
You can find that in your own home. Maybe it exists out there that you can find that in a public school.
That would be tough, but
If you can,
yeah.
then that's an option
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
But as we're raising our children, the most important thing has to be, what are the adults in their world telling them?
Yeah.
And that message has to be consistent. It has to be clear. And if bringing them home is the only way to accomplish that, then God will provide a way. And so what you were asking about the socialization, I don't know of anyone who just sits on the dining room and never does anything. That's not how you educate your kids.
Right.
You have social circles. You have you have trail life groups. You have
Church groups.
Church
Yeah.
groups.
Our kids
and
got
things.
very involved
Oh,
in church.
Hey, we
And
practically
yeah.
had to pull the reins back on socialization. There was
Yeah.
so much that was going on.
That's really the point, isn't it? Kids are going to be socialized
Sure.
one way or another. The real question here is, who do you want to do the socializing
Right.
in your child's life? We were very purposeful, very intentional about who was socializing our children. We wanted to be first in socializing them, and then we chose families that we connected with. We had people in our fellowship, and there were even times when our kids were very young that we pulled back a little bit on maybe a friend that
Sure.
didn't really come from the background that we were wanting to socialize our child.
Yeah.
And so we had to be very intentional about that. But kids are going to be socialized.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
And I think that there's one thing that across the board is always said about children who have been homeschooling for a period of time.
Right.
They know how to talk to adults.
Yes. Yeah. And I've noticed that kids who are raised up in the public school system often do not.
Mhm.
They struggle to talk to adults
Mhm.
because they spend so much of their time talking to their peers that they really don't have the ability to speak to adults for very long. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that can be challenging. How about another person who is saying, sports was a big deal for me when I was in high school. I played basketball, I played football, played volleyball, so forth. And I really would like my child to be able to participate in sports. But if we homeschool, is that even a possibility?
Yeah, and I can't speak to every single state and every city or county where people may live, but in our experience, that's just not an issue at all. Kids who are homeschooled seem to have the same open doors into either public school situations, other group situations.
Yep.
It's just not an issue. We had kids that played public school sports.
Yep.
And it worked out fine. We had kids that played league sports in a
Within our
Christian school league.
Christian organization. Yep.
And that worked out fine. So there are options. There's always options.
There really are. And so if there's a parent who is saying, well, I would homeschool, but I want my child to experience sports like I did, I have a couple of statements I want to make to that parent. First of all, you can do that. If you really care about your child participating in sports, you can find sports that they can participate in without being in the public educational system.
Right.
But secondly, the question that I would ask a parent who says, but I really want my child to experience sports, I would say, at what cost? And I think that's an important
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
At what cost are you wanting your child to participate? Are you willing to potentially lose the child just so that they can play in sports. I mean, sports is wonderful. As you know, when our kids were in sports, I got involved. I was never good at coaching, so I found a way to get involved by becoming a basketball referee.
Yeah.
I was never very good at it, but I got involved and I enjoyed it, and it was something I could do with my kids.
Right.
I even helped out with volleyball a little bit, doing some of that, being a line judge and that sort of thing. And sports was a big part of our kids, really all four of them. You know, the girls played basketball and volleyball, the boys played football and basketball. They got involved a lot and they
And
enjoyed it.
And they made lifelong friends doing it too,
You
from
know,
their
and
teammates.
our youngest son is now at 28, 29 years old. How old is he?
28.
He's 28. He's coaching
Yep.
private school, Christian school basketball and enjoying it,
Yeah.
I will add. And so he's giving back, and which
Right.
is really neat to see as well.
Yeah. It
So,
is.
so what can parents expect? I mean, I think there's a lot of parents who think about, but how's my kid going to turn out? I mean, are they going to be able to go to college? Are they going to be able to get a job? Will colleges even accept my child with a homeschool diploma?
Mhm. And again, in every area that I'm aware of, it's just not an issue. Our kids, went to college, some of them,
Yeah.
and trade schools are open. In fact, I have heard, and I think this is legitimate, that there are many schools, both collegiate and trade, that seek out homeschool kids.
I've heard that too.
Because there is just, they are known to be good students and good learners.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, job wise, somebody might look at you and me and look at our four kids. We've got two girls and two boys.
Yep.
And they might say, well, how did they turn out?
Yeah. Better than us.
That's a great way to put it. We've got our oldest daughter is in her early 40s. She's got four kids of her own. Now, she never went to college. She made a determination that she was going to be a mom,
Yeah.
and she has also homeschooled her kids. Now, she's also sprinkled some private Christian school
Right.
in with her homeschooling regimen.
Right.
So, but
And that is the beauty of the day and age that we live in right
yes, it
now.
is.
It is
The flexibility.
the flexibility, I think anywhere you live is it's wide open. You just have to pray and research and do what's right, for
For
your
your child.
family. Yeah.
Yeah.
In her case, her third is finishing off at a Christian high school.
Yeah.
And that's great. I think we may have chosen that if that had presented itself
Yep.
at the time.
Yep.
Because high school is a little bit more, you do have to, whoever is doing the schooling has to put a little bit more effort
Yep.
into it.
Now, our second born, our son, he went to Bible college for 2 years, did not go to any other career type college, but he has been very successful in life.
Yeah.
He has a YouTube channel along with his wife that absolutely dwarfs ours. It's called Garden Answer, very popular. And he has learned so much, but I think it really started with his heart to learn. Aaron was always a very curious little boy. He always had questions, most of which I couldn't even answer. But he is adaptive and a leader and a businessman, and he has just done a fantastic job with his wife and family.
And I'd say that is a very common characteristic among young men who are homeschooled, is that they become very good entrepreneurs.
Yes, and boy, that defines him, doesn't it? He
Yeah.
is an entrepreneur.
I mean, we have seen a lot of young men in our day that were homeschooled that just start great businesses.
yeah.
trade businesses
Yeah.
and other kinds. So,
Now, our third child, and we have to tell people that we had 2 kids and then we took 8 years off having children.
mhm.
And then we had 2 more, which lengthened your homeschooling
It did.
career
So, yeah.
by a lot
Yeah.
because the kids weren't clustered together. Plus, you were homeschooling kids in middle school while you had babies at your feet.
Yeah, but I never had to homeschool more than 3 children at one time because
They were spread out.
by the time the oldest graduated, I hadn't even started the baby
That's
yet.
right. Tim was 5 years old when she got married. His oldest sister got
Yeah,
married.
yeah.
That's right.
So I only ever did 3 at one time.
Yeah.
But I was doing kindergarten and senior
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah. So our third daughter, our third child, I should say, did not go to college,
Mhm.
and but during her high school years, she developed a musical gifting that we recognized,
Right.
and we focused some of those areas.
Mhm.
She did take some classes. I say she didn't go to college, but during her high school years, she actually took some community college classes on music theory and
Right.
things like that, and she was very adept in that area. I remember she took to that.
Yeah, and I taught piano lessons and she knew things about music theory that bent my mind. I couldn't follow it at all.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. She's now married
Mhm.
and living on the East Coast with her husband. But, she's doing wonderfully. And we have such a good relationship with her. And then our final child, who we've mentioned, is 28 years old. He went to just, I think, 1 or 2 semesters,
Mhm.
one semester
Mhm.
of Bible college, and really thought about doing some collegiate basketball, but that didn't pan out. And so he got into the business world.
And he was the quintessential, I'll start in the mailroom and I will be vice president.
And he got there.
He did.
Yeah.
In a few short years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because he had a drive and he had an
Oh,
eagerness
That
and
kid, I knew that drive didn't come from me,
Mhm.
and it probably comes more from your side of the family, but the things he accomplished by simply working hard, being devoted, dedicated. And here's a kid who didn't go to college.
yeah.
He didn't go to college, but and I don't want to make it all about money because it's not all about money. And I think all the people listening know that that's our heart, that things are not all about money, but he's making the kind of an income that people with 4-year degrees are barely making.
I watched a video from Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy,
Yeah.
one time, and he's probably about our age. And he was making the point. Of course, he's not a big fan of college educations for no purpose.
Yeah.
He's a fan of college educations for a good purpose, for professionals, but not just to
Go to
that you don't-
college
right.
and incur debt.
But he, in this video, he pulled out his cell phone and he said, so I went to college in the late 60s. And he said, and I learned all these things. And he pulled out his cell phone and held it up and he said, you don't have to do it anymore. It's all right here.
Oh, interesting.
And we both know for young people, the internet can be a really spooky place.
Yeah.
You have to be careful. But it is true what he says. You can, as long as you have a drive and an ambition, you can learn anything
Yeah.
you need to learn.
Yeah.
Because it's a different world
Yeah.
than growing up in the 60s. And the only way to learn those things was to go to a college and be taught them.
Yes.
Well, now you can you can reach out. Well, we have a
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
channel.
The resources are amazing.
Yeah. And so that I feel like should kind of tamp down that argument about, well, I'm afraid my kids will have to live under a bridge because they'll never, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. No, it's just they can learn whatever they need to learn.
Oh,
They
yeah.
can do whatever they want to do. They can start whatever business they want to. That's just not an issue. But I think one of the most challenging things for a young mother is the fact that when you're going to keep your kids home all the time,
Yeah.
you're going to have to train them
Yes.
or you're going to go crazy.
Yes.
And child training is a very, very important aspect of parenting.
Yes, it is.
But unfortunately, in our culture, we can avoid it and then just make do until they go to school. And now they're really off the grid.
Right.
And we're only with them for a couple hours and we manage those couple hours. And that's not ideal.
That's really not parenting, is
That's
it?
not parenting.
It's not the kind of responsible parenting that we would hope that parents would want to embrace. You know, we are stewards of these children. They are given to us by the Lord, and He gives us them just like He gives us other things to be stewards and to be faithful with them. And we found that it was much more gratifying to have the kind of input in their lives that was going to make a difference,
Yeah.
to be able to shape them and speak into their lives and have Bible devotions with the family when they would be at school, sitting in a classroom of 30 or 40 kids, learning a thing. Here we have them at home, and we're able to talk to them about the things that really matter.
Right.
And it was a really very gratifying time. It was a busy time for us as a family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was pastoring a church, and with all the responsibilities and challenges that go along with that. But we found that homeschooling also presented us with a freedom to take a day. You know, my day off was typically Monday.
Right.
So we turned that into our family day.
Mm-hmm.
And we often didn't do any homeschooling on Monday.
No, we never did the whole way through until my rule was that I taught 4 days a week, Tuesday to Friday. And when the kids hit high school and they needed to add that 5th day, they were big enough to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
And they did their own work on Mondays. I still didn't teach on Monday.
Yeah.
But they had a 5-day-a-week schedule
Yeah.
then in high school, but
Yeah.
not the little kids.
Yeah.
They just don't need that much rigid.
They don't. I mean, when you have a child who's in 1st or 2nd grade, how long of a school day would be probably happening in a homeschool environment?
For my style, I think that if you kids in elementary school from like 1st to 6th grade, if you're doing more than maybe 2 to 3 hours at the table, you're doing too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we developed loose philosophies over the course of the years. And one of the philosophies was that the school books were for days when something more interesting didn't happen. So if there was a house being built across the street
Yeah.
and the big trucks were coming in with those huge boom arms
Yeah.
and they were dripping concrete, that was more interesting than the school book.
Yeah.
And the school book's just closed. It's like, let's just observe real life.
Yeah. And the kids had so many questions about what they were seeing,
Sure.
and those were learning opportunities.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So let's begin to wrap this up. A mother comes to you and she says, I need to start homeschooling. I feel like the Lord is leading me this way. I don't have a clue how to start. What would you tell her?
Well, if it was someone in my own local area, I would probably get her connected with another homeschool mom that I knew, or I would find in her church. Or if I didn't know her, I would say, look, go to your church.
Yeah.
Go to your pastor and ask who knows about this.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we did at the beginning. We got hooked up. I actually connected with the gal who ran the local co-op group, and she invited us over right away for a play date, and just kind of I started making friends and
Yep.
knowing that. So the first thing is to make connections. I'd say back up a minute and pray, but we're already assuming that
prayer has gone into it.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know that that's even complicated because not every husband and wife are always on the same page at the beginning.
Right.
I hear testimonies over and over again where mom was just like, this isn't good. We can't keep the kids in this. And dad's worried. And then a couple years later,
Yeah.
now he's on board as much as she was in the beginning.
Yeah.
And those are delicate issues, and that they just need some,
Yeah.
maybe counseling from a pastor or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'd say go to your church, find out what community is, what is the homeschool community at your church.
Often
If
there
there is none,
Yeah.
You might need to make a change
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
churches,
Now, and there are support groups. There are whole
Absolutely.
support that exist outside of the church, even.
Mhm,
Now, we were fortunate enough to be a part of a support group early on, and it was called CHAMP,
mhm,
and it was an acronym for that kind of a Christian Homeschool Association
mhm.
for our particular counties. But it was a very positive experience, as
Sure.
I recall. And there were often opportunities to learn along with other families
Mhm.
during that time as well. So support groups can be a huge help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just encourage someone to, if you feel like this is how God's directing you, find out where your people are, who
Yeah.
your people are, and just dive in.
Yeah.
Just dive in. You're going to learn so much. I would also say in your 20s or 30s, saying to yourself, I have to do this for 26 years. That sounds just daunting.
Yes.
But now, of course, I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a blip.
Yeah.
That amount of time, it was just like, what else was I going to
And
do?
you grew closer to your children.
Oh, absolutely.
I
And we
mean,
have we have common, we have inside jokes together. We
yep.
have common
Yep.
literature that, I always we read a lot of books in our home,
Yeah.
and so we have a common frame of reference for a lot of things, and that just doesn't disappear.
No, it sure
That's
doesn't.
lifelong.
It's, yep.
And that's how I say at the beginning, I say you kind of grow your friends.
Yeah. And our
So,
two, again, we've said, but as our two kids, the two kids that of ours that have their own children are
mhm.
also homeschooling their kids.
Yeah, so
And
sweet.
it is just a really cool um, sort of a deal to watch,
Yeah.
.
So that's a long tail of the question that the gal asked. It's like, what was your experience homeschooling? There, we
Yeah.
probably have a few more hours that we could talk about,
Yeah, this
but
podcast really drew out of a single question. Somebody saying, "Hey, I heard you guys homeschooled. Talk
mhm,
to me about this." So we decided to do a whole podcast on this subject, and I'm glad we did. I think there may be more questions that people may want to ask, and so we'll use the same email address that we do for our Q&A, our Bible Q&A. If somebody has more homeschool questions, we'll do our best. You can email us at questions@lifebibleministry.com, but you're going to be better off going to your pastor, going to your local homeschool support group leaders and asking the questions there, because there you need really someone ultimately that you can sit down with and find out what opportunities are available to you,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay. Well, hey, this has been a great podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we just want to encourage people to keep praying, do what's best for your kids, and raise them in the Lord. There are promises in the word that go along with that.